Today we are going to be reading the story, The Gift of the Magi, and as you read it, you will be going through and deciding the meaning of words based on the context clues in the story. So you should have a copy of the story as well as this document. So we're going to do the first few together. Here I have the word, a spot for you to decide the definition, the sentence where you can find this word in the story, and a place for you to write context clues. I've also given you the page number where the word is. Now, it's important that as you read the story, you stop at each word. Don't go through and read the words and just try to determine the definition, because you'll probably miss out on context that will help you decide the meaning, as well as you won't have a good understanding of what the story is about. So, what you're going to do is, as you read, like I said, stop, try to decide the meaning of the word from the context of the story. If you have trouble, you may check your definition with Google, but I first want you to try to define it on your own. And then finally, what clues, context clues from the story helped you? It could be in the sentence, but it could also be elsewhere in the paragraph. I just gave you the sentence as a point of reference so you can find it in the story. It doesn't mean your context clues just have to come from the sentence. It can come elsewhere in the paragraph, and they probably should. So let's go ahead and look at the story and do the first few of these together. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Penny saved 1 and 2 at a time by haggling with the grocer, the vegetable man, and the butcher. Her cheeks still burned thinking about it. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. Okay, so we found our word, haggling. So what we want to do is now think about what could this word mean. So let's look at the context. We know she doesn't have a lot of money, right? She only has $1.87. So probably pretty poor. Even though this was written in 1905, $1.87 still wasn't much. So we also know she saved pennies, a couple at a time, and she saved these by haggling it with the grocer, the vegetable man, and the butcher. So places where you buy stuff. So she was able to save money where she buys stuff. So we can assume this would be maybe, getting a cheaper price because she was able to save money. So if we were to check this with Google, you'd also know, it's like arguing or bartering. But we can get from the story that it's definitely getting a better price. And it doesn't have to be like the exact Google definition, but it should be, something that you can discern from the story. So as soon as I can get this up here, sorry about that. Okay. So you guys can go ahead and write this down as we go, but now we gotta think about the context. So if we look back at the story, we saw that, it happened in the grocery store, and she was saving pennies. So we can write those as context clues. So I don't know why that keeps happening, but we have penny saved. It happened to the grocer, the butcher, places where you buy stuff. And we also know she's embarrassed by that. So it said her cheeks still burned thinking about it. Cheeks were getting red. She was embarrassed, indicating she was embarrassed that she had to ask for a better price. So you can go ahead and pause the video and write down the context clues and the definition if you have not. Hopefully you paused the video. Now let's read and try to decide the next three together on page 1. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl, so Della did it. At least her tears spared her the sight of their $8 a week rooms with their threadbare furnishings. In the hall below was a mailbox filled with bills that she didn't have the heart to open, and the doorbell didn't work. Below the bell was the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had sounded good when the owner was making $30 a week, but now the income had shrunk to $20, so it looked like the swell name belonged somewhere else. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and he was greatly hugged by Mrs. Dillingham Young, which was all very good. Okay, so we just saw 3 of them, shabby and threadbare. Now, you probably by reading, shabby couch, threadbare furnishings, they're both describing furniture. Like our furnishings is like things that are, in your house or in your, like couches, chairs, things like that. So they probably mean, we can assume, similar things. So we know they're poor, and she wanted to be spared the sight, right? So we can assume it's not a good thing. And if it's a furniture and it's shabby, it's probably not well taken care of, probably not very nice. So we can look at the definition. For both of these, old, run down, could do something like falling apart, used a lot, because usually when someone's poor, they don't have very nice furniture. So that can be a clue to help us know that they don't have a lot of money. And even though $8 was a lot more than it was today, we can assume that could be a clue, because the rent being only $8, that means their place that they live in is probably not very nice, probably pretty cheap. We know that they're poor, so that can help us assume that their furniture is also then not very nice. So again, similar context clues. You can also add that she was crying over it, because she had really nice things. She'd probably be happy and peaceful, but not necessarily upset at the place that they live. So you can go ahead and pause and write down the context clues for these. Okay, hopefully you paused to write down the definition and the clues. So let's look at the last one for page 1, flat. This one is pretty difficult. This one is proven to be pretty difficult because a lot of times you'll want to just go and look it up. Kids want to look it up in the dictionary to use, but there's so many definitions of flat, and you want to make sure you're using it in the right context. That's why you can't just go look it up and define it, because you'll probably write the wrong one, because it's not like a surface or anything, or like something that's like unmoving or not bumpy. That's not what we're talking about here. Let's look back in the sentence. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim. So as he's coming home from work and reaches his flat above. So what can we assume? Let's look at the clues we have. We know where he goes home after work. It's above something. His wife is there to greet him. And where is Della? Somewhere where they have a couch and furnishings and rent rooms, right? There's a hall below it with a mailbox full of bills. And so if we kind of put all this together, where do people go after work that's above something? So like maybe there's multiple floors, or there's that he could go to. There's a mailbox on the bottom floor, and his wife is there, and they rent rooms. If we put it all together, that adds up to an apartment. Because apartments, if we think about it, especially if you think about like downtown Elkhart, there are apartments, above businesses. So it's the apartment where he lives is above his work. So it's above his work. He goes above. There's mailboxes, just like apartments. The mailboxes are usually on the first floor, so the postman doesn't have to go up to every single apartment. And it's their home. So those are all clues. Also their rent. Those are all clues that we could use to help us. So we have the fact that he said, sorry about that, guys. The fact that it says home. There's mailboxes in the hall below. It's above his job. You could also even put that his wife is there, that they rent rooms. So there's so much more you can use than just in this sentence. So that's why it's so important that you guys read the story, stop after the word, and then look around. Don't just go through this chart. You need to read the story and stop. Try to define it from the story, not just Google, because words have multiple definitions. So again, if you need to, write this down, and then go and begin reading the story, finish reading the story, and define the rest of the words.